Nietzsche on decadence. So the reason I've chosen this subject is not only Nietzsche's relentless fight against Philistine culture and his battle and his attempt to Philistine culture, which was actually suffocating the birth and development of higher men, but mainly because his intention to revive the flourishing of individuals and cultures. I find it extremely contemporary relevant. I feel that his attempts and his philosophy are more actually important now than ever. I'm not extremely happy with the way that civilization has went in our attempt to conquer the earth and nature with technology and science. We have forgotten much about ourselves. So, as early as in BT, Nietzsche is suggesting us that he is diverting from extremely powerful Schopenhauer's influence on him. And as we know, Schopenhauer was a pessimist, and for Schopenhauer, life was not worth living. So Nietzsche was under extreme influence, and in many occasions he actually says about Schopenhauer, the great and my only teacher, Arthur Schopenhauer. He praises him a lot. I can say I believe without Schopenhauer there would be no Nietzsche. That's obvious. But as early as in The Birth of Tragedy, that it was published in 1872, Nietzsche is moving away from Schopenhauer. Nietzsche is trying to justify life. Nietzsche tries to understand which is that culture that maybe we should revive now in order to escape that pessimistic view of life. And he finds that culture in pre-Socratic Greece. So even in the first book, he is focusing on the flourishing of individuals and culture, and for that he finds art indispensable. So in the BT, Birth of Tragedy, he actually identifies 4 different types of culture. So some of you who were here while I was talking about it earlier in my lectures probably know the 4 different types of cultures are Apollonian, Dionysian, Socratic, and tragic. What they all have in common is that every single one of them incorporates illusion, even Socratic. They incorporate illusion in order to help people cope with horrors and terrors of life, to cope with human condition. So Nietzsche agrees with Schopenhauer's view that suffering is ineluctable, ubiquitous. Nietzsche agrees with Schopenhauer's descriptive view of suffering, but he doesn't agree with his evaluation of suffering. Because for Schopenhauer, suffering is the greatest evil, and therefore we have to avoid it. And the best way to avoid suffering is actually, according to Schopenhauer, is to repudiate our desires. By repudiation of desires, we repudiate life itself. So we, in a way, start extinguishing life. It's very similar to Buddhism. Nietzsche doesn't agree with that. For Nietzsche, suffering is necessary for life affirmation. It's like a test, it's like a challenge. So we need suffering. We need strong enemies. He says that later on. Choose strong enemies, because then your victory will be won. So harsh as the suffering, more stronger our affirmation of life. So that overcoming of suffering, overcoming of obstacle, is for Nietzsche the way that we affirm life. So how is that to be done? So as I said, there are four different types of culture that he identifies. So Apollonian culture is the culture in which illusion, beautiful illusion, is the one that we experience in plastic arts. For example, painting, sculpture, and also poetry. So these moments of our complete surrender to that beautiful illusion, which actually brings us into that state of dreaming, is the moment that we are completely free. We are free of any suffering. We are free, according to Schopenhauer, we are free from the will, because will is constantly pushing us into more wanting, more desiring. So the only time we are completely free, rested from the will, is that moment of aesthetic pleasure. So in Apollonian culture, that aesthetic pleasure was actually in the moment of experiencing the feeling of the beautiful. The problem with that is that we cannot stay in that state for long. We stay in that state only for a few moments. And then once we get distracted, like for example in a museum, you're looking at Van Gogh's picture and you're completely taken away. These are those rare moments of the state of dreaming. You almost say to yourself, says Nietzsche, I'm dreaming, let me keep dreaming. You want to stay there, but you can't, because other people are talking, your girlfriend or boyfriend is asking you to move, and then you are out of it. So that is not sustainable. That culture was obviously necessary, and thanks to that culture and that idea of Apollonian illusion, Greeks have created Olympian gods. Gods were there to help them living, to help them overcome the struggles of life. The second one was Dionysian. Dionysian culture is the culture that comes from the East. This is the culture which allows people to lose themselves as individuals through drunkenness, through orgiastic frenzy. This is where subjects, individuals, lose themselves and they become part of something bigger, something eternal, something which is continuously rolling under the everyday's life of individuals. Nietzsche calls it eternal mother, or being, essence of being, something that is there for eternal life. So we are all part of it. And when we get lost into that eternal life through, for example, intoxication, we are completely abandoning our subjectivity and therefore our suffering. So that culture, Dionysian culture, also through implementation of illusion, which is now Dionysian illusion, helps people to cope with life, with horrors of life, as Nietzsche says. But also that is dangerous because people can completely get taken away. And he explains that in detail in The Birth of Tragedy, which I found a fascinating book. And I don't want to go that way now because it's going to take me a few hours just to talk about that. So another one that he finds, The Birth of Tragedy, the title suggests that his way out from these two unsustainable cultures, Apollonian and Dionysian, he calls tragic. And we are only capable of arriving to that moment of tragic illusion through tragedy. Tragedy is for him the pinnacle, the apex of art. And through tragedy, we get immersed completely in the Dionysian illusion through music, but because of the plot and the acting, we are still participating to Apollonian momentum. And because of both of them, we are saved, says Nietzsche, not disappearing and psychologically get completely destroyed into Dionysian element. But Apollonian moment brings us up to reality. So what we realize actually through tragedy, completely opposite to what Aristotle was talking and also Schopenhauer, we realize that our individual lives have been taken too seriously. We have seen that eternal life, that eternal being, eternal mother, essence of being. We have seen it. Now we know. We have experienced it through music, and we know now that our individual lives are not as serious as we thought before. So therefore we kind of let it go and start living finally free, without fear of dying, of suffering, because even if we die, we are still part of that eternal being. So somehow Nietzsche finds out that in this tragic culture, which is much more sustainable, Greeks managed to live their lives and cherish lives. So they could have lived their lives in full, only in the tragic culture. Now it's interesting to mention Socratic culture. This is where we belong today. But he was criticizing that then, because Socrates is known to say that knowledge is a virtue. Socrates understood suffering intelligibly, and he wanted to beat suffering, overcome suffering intelligibly via knowledge. Now Nietzsche says, thanks to great minds of Kant and Schopenhauer, we know the thing in itself, noumenon, cannot be understood. We can't touch it. It's impossible, because simply noumenon belongs outside the categories of time, causality, and space. And this is where our mind, rational mind, operates. So everything which is outside these three categories of time, space, and causality, we cannot think of. Therefore, it is impossible to understand what is that thing in itself, what is noumenon. Now, Socrates thinks that we can do that. Science today thinks that we can do it too. And therefore, by knowing, we can overcome suffering. Now, what Nietzsche says is that what is important in Socratic man, or he's calling Alexandrian man, or scientific man, what is important is the faith in truth. Not truth in itself, but the faith that truth is achievable. And he quotes what was his name now? He gives us a quote, and he says, one of the top scientists in his day said, what matters most is not the truth itself, but that faith in truth, that struggle to come to the truth. And Nietzsche says that faith in truth is an illusion, and he calls it Socratic illusion. So he said, Socratic man can function and can exist in that culture as long as he doesn't ask the essence of Socratic approach to truth, which is itself an illusion. And this is where modern world is. We think we have done everything with development of science and technology, but Nietzsche would say, no, we didn't. Now, in all these four cultures, it seems that Nietzsche is focusing only on redemption of individuals, of flourishing of individuals. And this is exactly what is happening in the Birth of Tragedy. He doesn't talk necessarily about the flourishing of a culture. He talks about ways that individuals can find their redemption, can cope with life. So for that, art is necessary, and illusion is absolutely indispensable. We need illusion for that. We cannot do it rationally. His famous credo from the Birth of Tragedy is, only as an aesthetic phenomenon the world and existence can be eternally justified. Short sentence. But I spent 6 years trying to understand and explain that sentence. Only as an aesthetic phenomenon the world and existence can be eternally justified. Only as an aesthetic, meaning not moral. The world and existence, meaning life, can be eternally justified. Eternally, meaning a sustainable approach. Socratic illusion, Apollonian, Dionysian, they are not sustainable. They are momentary. But tragic illusion, this is what he thinks about when he says only as an aesthetic phenomenon the world and existence can be eternally justified. And he says this is only possible by those noble souls. Noble souls. We see this is not a culture, we're talking about individuals who suffer more than anybody else, who suffer much deeper and more profoundly. So who are these noble souls? Where are these noble? Do we have these noble souls now? Or maybe they don't exist anymore. Why he thinks they are embedded in that culture of pre-Socratic Greece? Why then? Why not after that? Because those noble souls were people who didn't suffer because they didn't have bread to eat, as Jesus said in Desert to the Devil, man needs more than bread to live. They were suffering because they understood the meaning of life, the problem of human life, the problem of ephemerity, of transiency, of contingency. Life itself is not long enough. So what do I do? What do I do? I think I know something. How do I know that I know? Epistemological problem. What is the beginning of everything? Where am I? Why am I here? Why am I not somewhere else? Why am I who am I and not somebody else? These are all questions of meaning of life. Metaphysical question. What should I do? Ethical question. What can I hope for? Religious question. You see, all these questions together, when you start digging into understanding the meaning of life, will make you suffer because you don't know answers to that, and you want to know the answers to that. And knowing it, you will discover that obstacles, read suffering, will be necessary for that, and you may need illusion for that in order to overcome them. So it seems as Nietzsche is talking only about individuals and their flourishing. But as we go further, as we go into untimely meditations, as we go into gay science, as we go into beyond good and evil, twilight of idols, genealogy of morality, we understand that Nietzsche has something else in mind as well. And this is the culture. Now, how the culture flourish now? Who makes culture flourishing? What is the flourishing culture? What is the good culture? What is the good society? And he says later on, he praises Rome, he praises Greeks, Romans. For him, society is like a pyramid, and it has to stay on the massive base of mediocrity, he says. So he even evaluates mediocrity as necessity, but in societies in which there is order on the social level, the cultural level, the same as order in an individual. So what is the order when it comes to individual flourishing? Why is disorder a disease for an individual? What kind of disorder we are talking about? Psychological disorder, or maybe a little bit more than psychological disorder. And Nietzsche answers, he gives us an answer. This is where what I debate in my paper, when I compare Jungian approach to Nietzschean approach, Jungian individuation to Nietzschean self-discovery and flourishing, right? So, in his famous aphorism in the gay science, the aphorism, what has to be done, what should be done, Nietzsche said what we need is to give style to one's character. Style to one's character. And that's done only by people who inquire about their own strengths and weaknesses and then put them into an artistic plan, Nietzsche says, in which even the weaknesses delight the eye. So he's talking about structuring one's inner state of strength and weaknesses into something which has to have an artistic plan. If it's artistic, obviously we need an illusion, artistic illusion there, something which is beautiful. And he says it's practiced by those who inquire their strengths and weaknesses and then put them into artistic plan. When everything becomes art and reason, and in which even weaknesses delight the eye. So Nietzsche doesn't say you have to go inside yourself, find the weaknesses and then cut them off. No, you have to integrate them. You need to put them into certain unity, equilibrium with the rest of yourself. And this is where philosophy only can help. This is not something easy to do. So he talks about order within an individual, within individual's character. If you can look at the character as a house, as a building. It has to be built in a proper order, otherwise it's going to fall. And then he continues, he says, one has to be satisfied with himself. Because if he is not, he's always ready for revenge. Then we have an enemy. And this is exactly what is happening on an everyday basis. You know, a lot of people who have internal problems and they're always ready for revenge. They're always ready to blame. They're always ready to downsize everybody else. Everybody is guilty, so they are the only right ones. And this is because of internal disorder. Now that internal subjective disorder can be also used as an example for social disorder. And Nietzsche says society is like a pyramid, and it stands on the base of huge mediocrity. Now by mediocrity, Nietzsche understands, as Hegel, all different services that people provide in the society. Everything which is instrumental to the society. Who belongs there? Doctors, architects, engineers, workers, carpenters, slaves. They all belong in that wide, solid base of mediocrity. So it's not very modern thought, because we don't think like that this way nowadays. Because this is how we are brought up, conditioned to think. But this is why it's important to hear these things, right? So we need order in the society. This is why he praises Rome. He says, empire built to last for thousands of years. But Rome collapsed, not because of external enemy. It collapsed because of internal enemy. It collapsed because of anemic vampires, he says. And that were, according to him, early Christians. Individuals who have denied their physical existence, their sexuality, nature, and just appreciated one part of themselves. So they didn't have structure. They didn't have that artistic creation of themselves, in which even the weaknesses would delight the eye. But a cut. They were not a whole, they were just partial. And for him, this is individual decadence, individual disorder, which actually brings the whole structure to collapse. When he talks about structure of society, comparing it to a pyramid, Nietzsche says the biggest value of everyone in this society is to understand that he exists for the bigger good, bigger than himself. Take, for example, Renaissance, another period in which humanity tried to flourish. Imagine Michelangelo having all these people around him doing necessary but simple work about pulling the marble, cutting the rough edges, bringing, cooking, doing all that labor work around him. They were proud to be part of him. But then what happens? Now we have liberals, really liberal freedom, liberal societies. Nietzsche calls them wooden iron, in which everybody thinks that everybody is something special. Typical picture of our society today, globally. Everyone thinks it's something special. Nobody thinks it's part of something bigger. And he says, imagine how it is to live, to give your life to something bigger. This is how you build an empire. when everybody has that view that I am the part of something big, starting from the slave all the way up. The moment, this is why socialism is directly linked to Christianity. The moment you don't have that attitude, that you are against the structure, but you are only after yourself, the whole structure crumbles. And ultimately you will disappear in that chaos. Because there is, without a structure, without social power, you're not going to be able to survive or flourish. So we see that decadence in individuals and society are interwoven, they depend on each other. So either society and individuals are flourishing or they are not. Nietzsche predicted exactly what is going to happen in 20th century because of decadence of his day in Germany and Europe. Nationalism. It's a disorder. And look what happened. He predicted, Dostoevsky predicted the same thing. Chaos happened in 20th century. So, Zarathustra, yeah, you said that you like Zarathustra. Yeah? Zarathustra, in the prologue to Zarathustra, Nietzsche starts Zarathustra with the appearance of a little man. He's a decadent man, the man of the future. His strength are his numbers. But little man runs around planet happily and saying, we have discovered happiness. Nietzsche starts that as an antipode to flourishing of the individual, because he is disgusted with the happiness of little things. People are happy with very, very little. And they live like that, and they are majority. And this is the prologue of Zarathustra, in which Zarathustra is the one who is trying to revive that flourishing of individuals and culture. He tries. What is important to understand is that actually Nietzsche started losing towards the end of his philosophical writing. He started losing faith in flourishing of culture. He turned back more into the flourishing of individuals. And he said what is important is that for the great things to happen is not just the great creator of things, the great spirits, the great individuals, but also the great people who will accept that. You need society, you need culture, you need a fertile soil that you can plant those ideas. So you need both. This was his idea throughout his philosophical life, but then towards the end he gave up on that. And he realized actually that the greatest things, or as he called them, thoughts, are the hardest to develop and the hardest to be understood. Almost the saying, they won't be understood. This is why Zarathustra is books for everyone and no one. So, I mean, this is the subject that can last for hours and hours and hours, and I just always have a problem to cut it off. But I think I brought enough for discussion now. So we're going to stop here, and you're going to make me change my mind now with some difficult questions. Okay, thank you.